There comes a point in our lives when we feel overwhelmed, depleted, and disconnected from what truly matters to us. We are constantly pulled in every direction by expectations, obligations, and the voices of others telling us what we should do. We find ourselves holding space for people, projects, and commitments that drain us, leaving us with little energy or time to nurture the things that bring us joy, peace, and authenticity. So, what if, just for a moment, we let go? What if we gave ourselves permission to ghost the things, people, and situations that no longer serve us without guilt or shame? It's not about cutting people off in anger or avoiding responsibility. It's about recognizing that we cannot pour from an empty cup, and sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for others is to walk away, even if only temporarily. Ghosting isn't about abandoning relationships or leaving people in the lurch. It's about being brave enough to create space for your own well-being. It's about being courageous enough to acknowledge when something is no longer aligned with your values or capacity and acting on that awareness. This is an act of self-respect and a deep commitment to your own growth. In a society that constantly demands more time, more energy, more productivity, it can be easy to forget the most fundamental truth. You are the most important asset you have. Self-care is not just a buzzword or a luxury that can be put off when life calms down. It is essential for your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Without it, we risk burnout, resentment, and ultimately losing touch with who we are at our core. We often think of self-care as something that requires extravagant gestures, a day at the spa, a week off from work, or a fancy meal. But true self-care is not about pampering yourself with occasional treats. It's about developing sustainable habits that nourish your body, mind, and spirit every single day. It's about showing up for yourself in the ways you deserve, recognizing that you can't give what you don't have. When we neglect self-care, we start to deplete our reserves. We push ourselves harder and longer, convincing ourselves that we'll rest when we have time, or once we meet this deadline. But the truth is, rest and replenishment are not optional. We cannot continue to pour from an empty cup. If we do, we risk not only exhaustion, but also bitterness, frustration, and a sense of disconnect from our own lives. Our relationships and responsibilities begin to suffer because we're too worn out to show up with intention, compassion, or presence. Taking the time to care for yourself, whether that's through physical activities like exercise and sleep, mental practices like journaling and meditation, or emotional care like setting boundaries and saying no, allows you to remain grounded in your purpose and values. It helps you stay in alignment with your true self, rather than becoming swept up in the demands of others and the chaos of the world around you. Self-care requires us to listen to our bodies, minds, and hearts. It's about paying attention to the signals that we're running low and honoring them. When you feel overwhelmed or burnt out, that's your cue to step back and rest. It's a red flag that you need to slow down and recharge, even if it means stepping away from obligations, expectations, or commitments. The reason we often resist self-care is because we've been conditioned to believe that taking care of ourselves is selfish. We're taught to prioritize others and put our own needs last. But the truth is, when we neglect our own care, we're doing a disservice to everyone around us. We can't show up for others in meaningful ways if we're constantly running on empty. Moreover, self-care is not just about physical rest. It also involves emotional and mental health. It's about creating space to process your feelings, acknowledging when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, and giving yourself permission to take a break. It's about finding the courage to say no when something isn't in alignment with your values, even if it means disappointing others. It's about setting boundaries that allow you to protect your time, energy, and emotional well-being. Taking care of yourself means acknowledging your limits and embracing the idea that it's okay to not be available for everyone all the time. You don't have to be everything to everyone. By taking the time to rest, recharge, and focus on your own needs, you're better able to show up as your true self when it counts. In the end, self care isn't just about what you do to restore yourself. It's about how you create a lifestyle that prioritizes your well being. It's about choosing to treat yourself with the same love, respect, and care that you give to others. By doing this, you set a powerful example for those around you, especially for those who may also be neglecting their own self care. It's not just about you, it's about creating a culture of care and compassion that ripples outward. When you make self care a priority, you give yourself the gift of strength, resilience, and balance. You give yourself the space to be fully present, to contribute to the world in a meaningful way, and to experience life in a deeper, more authentic manner. You become more capable of facing life's challenges, nurturing your relationships, and staying aligned with your own values and purpose. So remember, self care is not a luxury. It is a vital, non negotiable part of living a healthy, fulfilling life. When you take care of yourself, you are not only protecting your own well being, but you are also creating the foundation for a life of authenticity, presence, and joy. At first glance, vulnerability and boundaries may seem like opposites. Vulnerability often being perceived as exposing oneself, while boundaries are seen as ways of protecting ourselves. But in reality, vulnerability and boundaries are deeply interconnected, each reinforcing the other in a powerful way. To live authentically and engage meaningfully with the world around us, we must understand how to honor both vulnerability and boundaries in a balanced, healthy way. Vulnerability, at its core, is the willingness to show up and be seen for who you truly are, without armor, without pretense, and without the need to be perfect. It is an act of courage, a leap into the unknown where we allow ourselves to be open to both connection and potential hurt. It's about embracing our imperfections, acknowledging our fears, and giving ourselves permission to be fully human. But here's the crucial truth. Vulnerability is not about being open to everything or everyone. It's not about being emotionally exposed at all costs, leaving ourselves susceptible to being hurt or drained by others. Vulnerability is about choosing to show up in ways that are meaningful and aligned with our values, and it's about doing so from a place of self-respect and wisdom. In this sense, vulnerability requires boundaries, clear, loving, and firm boundaries that allow us to protect our energy, our emotional well-being, and our sense of self. Boundaries are not about shutting people out or building walls that isolate us. Rather, they are the invisible lines we draw to define where we end and where others begin. They help us determine what we are willing to accept and what we are not, ensuring that we can engage with others in a way that is healthy, balanced, and reciprocal. Setting boundaries requires deep self-awareness. It demands that we get clear on what we need, what we value, and what we will not tolerate. Without boundaries, we risk giving so much of ourselves to others that we lose sight of our own needs and desires. We become overwhelmed, burnt out, and resentful, and our vulnerability, once a source of strength, turns into a weakness. When we set boundaries, we are giving ourselves the gift of self-respect. We are acknowledging that our time, energy, and emotions are precious and deserve to be honored. By setting healthy boundaries, we teach others how to treat us, and we show up more fully for the people and things that matter most to us. But vulnerability and boundaries together require practice and intention. It's not always easy to know where to draw the line, especially when it comes to relationships. We want to be open, we want to be present, but we also need to protect ourselves from being taken advantage of or from losing ourselves in others. It's easy to mistake being vulnerable with being available for everyone all the time, but that's not sustainable. When we are truly vulnerable, we are willing to share our truths. But that doesn't mean we have to share everything with everyone. Healthy boundaries help us decide what is ours to share and with whom. Vulnerability, in this sense, is about selective openness, about choosing the people who are worthy of seeing our raw, unguarded selves, and being clear about what we are comfortable with and what we are not. It's about understanding that we have the right to say no, to walk away, or to take a break from a situation or a person when we need to protect our mental and emotional space. Boundaries also help us honor our own needs for rest, reflection, and rejuvenation. Vulnerability is a two-way street. It's about showing up for others, yes, but it's also about showing up for yourself. Without boundaries, we run the risk of giving so much that we deplete ourselves, leaving nothing for our own personal growth or the time we need to process our emotions and experiences. When we have strong boundaries, we can give and receive more freely because we understand our limits and are comfortable with them. Moreover, vulnerability and boundaries together help us cultivate deeper, more meaningful relationships. When we have clear boundaries, we're able to be authentic in how we show up, and we can connect with others in ways that are respectful, genuine, and mutually supportive. We're not giving out of obligation or fear of rejection. We're giving from a place of love, respect, and genuine connection. We can share our vulnerabilities without fear of exploitation or judgment because we know where we stand and what we need. It's important to note that boundaries can be fluid and dynamic. They're not rigid rules that can never be adjusted. Boundaries can shift depending on the situation, the people involved, and how we're feeling in the moment. What's most important is that we stay in tune with ourselves and we allow our boundaries to evolve as we do. This is where vulnerability becomes particularly powerful. It allows us to check in with our emotions, our capacity, and our needs, and make adjustments when necessary. It gives us the freedom to say, I need more time for myself, or I can't take on this responsibility right now, without guilt or fear of rejection. When we honor both our vulnerability and our boundaries, we create an environment where we can thrive, where we feel safe enough to express ourselves, and where we have the freedom to step back when we need to. We create space for others to show up as their true selves, and we model what it looks like to engage in relationships with integrity, self-respect, and authenticity. Vulnerability is not weakness, and boundaries are not walls. When used together, they form the foundation of a life that is both deeply connected to others and profoundly grounded in our own sense of self. Vulnerability and boundaries allow us to live fully, to give and receive love, to engage in the world with courage, and to protect ourselves in ways that empower us to be our truest selves. It's through this delicate dance of vulnerability and boundaries that we find our strength, both in how we relate to others and in how we honor ourselves. In today's world, rest is often viewed as a luxury, something that is earned after a long day of work or after achieving a significant goal. It's treated as an afterthought, something that we can indulge in only once we've ticked off all the items on our to-do lists. We've come to believe that if we are not constantly busy, productive, or on the move, we are somehow failing or falling behind. The hustle culture glorifies exhaustion, and the idea of resting can often feel like a guilty indulgence, but the truth is, rest is not a luxury. It is a vital, non-negotiable part of being human. Rest is essential for our physical, emotional, and mental health, and without it, we begin to deteriorate, not just in our bodies, but also in our relationships, our creativity, and our ability to function effectively in the world. It is a cornerstone of self-care, and it is absolutely necessary for living a full, balanced life. Rest is not just about sleep, although sleep is certainly one of its most critical components. Rest is about giving ourselves permission to stop, to pause, and to restore our energy. It's about disconnecting from the constant pressure to be on all the time and creating space to simply be, to breathe, to reflect, and to recharge. Rest allows us to replenish the reserves that are constantly being drained by the demands of work, family, social obligations, and the fast pace of modern life. When we don't prioritize rest, we begin to feel the effects in subtle and not so subtle ways. Our physical health suffers. We experience fatigue, aches, and a weakened immune system. Our mental health begins to deteriorate. We feel more stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed. Our emotional well being is impacted. We become irritable, impatient, and disconnected from the things that bring us joy and fulfillment. Our relationships also suffer because we don't have the energy or emotional capacity to show up for the people we care about. And perhaps most insidiously, we begin to lose touch with our own needs, desires, and sense of self. Rest is necessary because it allows our bodies to heal and regenerate. Every day, we face a myriad of stressors, both physical and emotional. Our bodies need time to recover from these pressures, and rest provides that opportunity. Sleep, in particular, is critical because it is during sleep that our bodies repair and restore themselves. Our muscles regenerate, our immune system strengthens, and our brain processes and consolidates the experiences and emotions of the day. Without adequate sleep and rest, our bodies are unable to function at their best, and we run the risk of chronic exhaustion, illness, and burnout. But rest is not only about the body, it is also deeply important for the mind. In our society, we are constantly bombarded with information, distractions, and demands. Our brains are continually processing and analyzing, rarely given the chance to slow down or reset. This mental overload leads to cognitive fatigue, making it harder to focus, think clearly, or make decisions. By allowing ourselves moments of rest, we give our brains the space to process, to reflect, and to let go of the mental clutter. This rest is critical for creativity, problem solving, and decision making because it allows us to come to our work with fresh eyes, a clearer mind, and a more relaxed nervous system. Emotional rest is just as crucial as physical and mental rest. In a world where we are often expected to put on a brave face, show up for others, and manage our emotions on a daily basis, we can easily find ourselves emotionally drained. We are constantly taking in the emotions of others, dealing with our own feelings, and navigating the complexities of life's ups and downs. Emotional rest is about giving ourselves permission to feel and process our emotions without judgment. It's about letting go of the pressure to always be on and taking the time to simply feel, express, and release our emotions in a healthy way. This kind of rest allows us to reconnect with ourselves, find clarity, and restore our emotional balance. When we recognize rest as necessary, not a luxury, we begin to shift our relationship with time and productivity. We start to understand that rest isn't an indulgence, it is an investment in our health, well being, and effectiveness. Rest allows us to show up as our best selves, ready to engage with the world around us. It gives us the energy, patience, and focus we need to do our work, nurture our relationships, and engage with our passions. It helps us stay grounded, resilient, and connected to our purpose. But it's not just about physical rest, it's about rest for the mind and spirit, too. How often do we allow ourselves the space to disconnect from the digital world, from constant notifications, and from the never-ending barrage of news and information? True rest involves giving our minds a break from the noise, the distractions, and the endless demands of the outside world. It's about creating intentional moments of quiet, solitude, and stillness where we can reconnect with ourselves, our values, and our deepest needs. These moments of rest are essential for maintaining our mental clarity, emotional resilience, and spiritual well-being. Rest is also about embracing the idea of enough. In a culture that constantly drives us to do more, achieve more, and be more, we often forget that rest is not a sign of weakness or failure. It's a reminder that we are human and we have limits. We are not machines, and we cannot operate at full capacity without proper restoration. Rest is the acknowledgement that we deserve to take care of ourselves, to put our needs first, and to honor our limits. It's the understanding that by resting, we are not falling behind. We are setting ourselves up to show up as our best selves in the future. Finally, rest is an act of self-compassion. It is a gentle reminder that we are worthy of care and nourishment, just as much as anyone else. It's about giving ourselves permission to take a step back, to let go of the pressure to constantly produce and perform, and to simply be. It's about embracing the fact that we deserve to rest, to recharge, and to nurture ourselves without guilt or shame. In doing so, we open the door to greater joy, creativity, and presence in every aspect of our lives. So let us redefine rest, not as a luxury or a treat, but as a necessity for our well-being. Let us honor our bodies, minds, and spirits by giving them the space they need to recover, rejuvenate, and heal. By making rest a priority, we are not only investing in our own health, but we are also giving ourselves the energy and vitality to show up fully for the world around us. Rest is necessary, not just for survival, but for living a fulfilling, vibrant life. And in embracing it, we give ourselves the gift of strength, clarity, and resilience to navigate the challenges of life with grace and authenticity. For many of us, especially those who have been conditioned to be caregivers, peacemakers, or fixers, it can feel almost instinctual to manage the emotions of everyone around us. We read the room, we anticipate needs. We soften our truths, we walk on eggshells to keep the peace. Somewhere along the way, we internalize the belief that it's our job to keep everyone happy, and that if someone is upset, uncomfortable, or disappointed, it must be because of something we did or something we failed to do. But let's be clear, you are not responsible for everyone else's emotions. Their anger is not automatically your fault. Their sadness is not your burden to carry. Their disappointment, discomfort, or emotional reactions are not something you need to fix, absorb, or feel guilty about. You are responsible for your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Other people are responsible for theirs. This is not about becoming cold or unempathetic. It's not about ignoring the needs of others or refusing to listen when someone is hurting. It's about drawing a healthy emotional boundary that honors where you end and where someone else begins. It's about acknowledging that you can offer compassion and care without absorbing responsibility for another person's emotional world. When we take on the role of emotional caretaker for everyone around us, we become overwhelmed, overextended, and emotionally drained. We start monitoring other people's moods as a measure of our own success. We take their reactions personally. We try to preempt their pain, smooth over their discomfort, and twist ourselves into emotional pretzels, trying to make everyone okay, often at the expense of our own needs, boundaries, and truth. And here's the hard part. Sometimes people will be upset with your truth. Sometimes people won't like your boundaries. They may feel rejected, abandoned, or hurt when you say no, when you step back, or when you choose to honor yourself over their expectations. That's okay. Their discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It just means they're having a human response, and that's theirs to process, not yours to prevent. When we over-identify with other people's emotions, we rob them of the opportunity to grow. We deny them the chance to learn how to sit with discomfort, to regulate their feelings, and to navigate challenges in a healthy, grounded way. In trying to shield others from hard emotions, we end up taking their power and ours. We disable mutual trust. We say, I don't believe you can handle this on your own, even if unintentionally. It's also important to recognize that people's emotional reactions are shaped by their history, their wounds, their patterns, and their perspectives, not just your actions. You may trigger something in them, but that does not make you responsible for the entirety of what they're feeling. Emotions are complex, and often have very little to do with you, even when you're the one standing in front of them. The truth is, you can be kind and someone might still feel hurt. You can be clear and someone might still be confused. You can be honest and someone might still feel betrayed. This does not mean you've failed. It simply means you've chosen to live with integrity rather than manipulation. It means you're no longer contorting yourself for the sake of emotional approval. It means you're trusting people to take responsibility for their inner life while you take responsibility for yours. Learning to unhook from other people's emotions doesn't happen overnight. For those of us who have spent years prioritizing the emotional comfort of others, this can feel deeply uncomfortable at first. It may bring up guilt, fear of rejection, or the belief that we're being selfish. But healthy relationships are not built on emotional martyrdom. They're built on mutual respect, accountability, and truth. When you release the responsibility of managing everyone else's emotional reactions, you make space for authenticity. You stop performing and start connecting. You stop trying to earn love through emotional labor and start experiencing love that is real and reciprocal. You learn to listen to your own needs and to trust that others are capable of handling their own feelings, even the messy, painful ones. This does not mean you stop caring. In fact, it means you care in a healthier, more sustainable way. You listen without rescuing. You empathize without absorbing. You support without sacrificing your own peace. You love with open hands instead of clenched fists. Emotional maturity is not about avoiding difficult conversations or emotions. It's about having them with boundaries. It's being able to say, I care about how you feel, but I'm not going to take responsibility for your reaction to my truth. It's knowing that you can be compassionate without becoming codependent. It's being willing to sit with the discomfort that comes when someone doesn't like what you've said or done, and not needing to fix it just to ease your own guilt. You're not doing anyone a favor by shrinking yourself, stifling your truth, or walking on eggshells. You are not a sponge for other people's projections, nor are you an emotional janitor tasked with cleaning up every messy feeling in the room. You are allowed to have boundaries. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to let people feel what they feel, even when it's hard to watch. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. You don't have to fix every broken mood. You don't have to sacrifice your well-being so someone else can avoid discomfort. You are responsible for your own words and actions. You are not responsible for how others choose to receive them. Let that truth sink in. Let it lighten the load you've been carrying. Let it set you free. We're often taught that ghosting is rude, heartless, or emotionally immature, that it's a betrayal, that it means we're abandoning people. But what if, stay with me here, ghosting isn't about cruelty or avoidance at all? What if ghosting, in certain situations, is actually an act of self-respect, of boundary setting, and even of healing? Let's reframe this. Ghosting is not abandonment. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's wisdom. Sometimes it's the clearest no we're allowed to give. We live in a culture that constantly pushes us to over-explain ourselves, to keep people comfortable, to stay in conversations and relationships long past their expiration dates out of politeness, obligation, or fear. But here's the truth. Not everyone deserves access to your time, your energy, or your peace. And you don't owe everyone closure. You don't owe everyone your presence. You are not required to sit through discomfort just to soothe someone else. Sometimes we've already tried to talk it through. We've set the boundaries. We've spoken up. We've asked for change. We've been patient, understanding, and forgiving. And still it's the same cycle. Still, we are being drained. Still, our needs are being ignored. And when we finally reach our limit, we often ghost not because we're cold, but because we're done. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. Ghosting becomes the boundary that words can no longer uphold. There are people who will twist your attempts at communication, People who gaslight, manipulate, guilt, trip, or consistently cross your boundaries even after you've clearly voiced them. There are people who don't want resolution, they want control. In those moments, ghosting isn't abandonment. It's the clearest signal of self-protection we have left. Because let's be honest, when someone has repeatedly dismissed your feelings, ignored your boundaries, or harmed you emotionally, what exactly are you supposed to owe them? More chances, more explanations, more of yourself. You don't owe continued access to someone who treats your presence like a guarantee. Ghosting gets a bad reputation because it's often painted in black and white terms. But life is more nuanced than that. Ghosting isn't always the result of someone being immature, flaky, or cruel. Sometimes it's the outcome of years of emotional labor and exhaustion. Sometimes it's what happens when your nervous system can't handle one more conversation, one more conflict, one more moment of trying to be the bigger person. Sometimes ghosting says, I love myself enough to stop setting myself on fire to keep someone else warm. Ghosting, in healthy contexts, isn't about ghosting everyone permanently. It's about recognizing that silence is also a boundary. It's about acknowledging that you are allowed to walk away from relationships that hurt you, drain you, or diminish you. You are allowed to choose peace over performance, safety over social norms, and healing over habits. And let's not forget, the people who truly care about you, the people who have earned a seat at your table, they don't force you into ghosting. They listen, they evolve, they respect your no. Ghosting isn't for the people who are willing to grow with you. It's for the people who have shown you they won't. Still, let's address the part that stings for many, but what about them? Aren't we just leaving people in confusion and pain? Yes, sometimes ghosting causes pain, but let's be real. If someone continually violated your boundaries, manipulated your empathy, or refused to take accountability, that pain is not on you to prevent. If they're confused, it's often because they weren't listening when you were speaking. If they're shocked, it may be because they were ignoring the slow erosion of the connection. You were giving signs. You were shrinking. You were trying to hold it together long before you let it go, and you are allowed to let go. We must also talk about the trauma side of this. For survivors of abuse, toxic relationships, or deep emotional betrayal, ghosting can be the only safe exit. When communication is dangerous, when the relationship is based on power or fear, when re-engagement only leads to further harm, ghosting isn't rude, it's self-defense. Let's stop shaming people for protecting themselves in a world that constantly teaches them to override their instincts in the name of being nice. Here's the deeper truth. Ghosting is not abandonment when the relationship already abandoned you. When your needs were not met, your voice was not heard, your presence was not cherished. You were already being left behind. Ghosting is not abandonment, it's acknowledgement. It's saying, I will not continue to participate in my own depletion. Of course, this doesn't mean ghosting is always the right or kindest answer. Sometimes, when the connection is loving and honest and simply no longer aligned, we owe people our honesty. We owe them a conversation. But that's discernment, not obligation. And discernment only comes when we've done the work of checking in with ourselves, of knowing our capacity, and of trusting our inner voice when it says, enough. You don't need to write a script or provide a thesis every time you walk away. You don't need to keep reopening wounds just to prove you're compassionate. You don't need to bleed for closure. If you've done what you can to be honest and clear, if you've asked for respect and not received it, if the relationship has become a cycle of pain, ghosting is not abandonment. It is release, and release is not selfish. It's sacred. There's a quiet, powerful kind of leadership that doesn't need a microphone, a title, or a stage. It's the leadership of someone who knows how to say no without guilt, who knows how to say yes without resentment, who doesn't confuse being kind with being compliant, who can love deeply while still holding space for their own needs. That's what modeling healthy boundaries looks like. And it's one of the most radical, loving things you can offer not just to yourself, but to every person watching you, because boundaries aren't walls. They're not punishments, and they're not cold. They are the lines that keep love honest. They are the edges that keep you whole. They are the architecture of self-respect. When you model healthy boundaries, you are doing more than protecting your energy. You're teaching others how to treat you. You're showing your children, your friends, your coworkers, your partners that love and limits can exist in the same sentence, that closeness and clarity are not opposites, they're companions. Let's be real, most of us weren't raised with great models of boundaries. We were taught to be agreeable, to keep the peace, to never rock the boat. We were praised for being helpful, selfless, accommodating. We were made to feel that saying no was rude, that needing space meant we were cold, that prioritizing ourselves was selfish. And now, as adults, we find ourselves exhausted, overcommitted, overextended, emotionally threadbare. Why? Because no one taught us that saying yes to everything is the fastest way to abandon ourselves. That's why modeling healthy boundaries is so powerful. It's not just about the lines you draw, it's about the permission you give others to draw their own. When you say, "I'm not available tonight," and don't apologize for it, someone else learns that they can rest too. When you say, "I'm not the right person for this request," you create space for someone else to stop people pleasing. When you say, "I love you and I need some time to think," you prove that intimacy and autonomy don't have to be at odds. Here's the truth: boundaries are not just personal, they are generational healing in motion. Every time you show someone what it looks like to honor your capacity, you break a cycle. Every time you say no with love, you rewrite the story that love means sacrifice. Every time you let someone sit in their own discomfort instead of rushing to fix it, you show them their own strength. And make no mistake, modeling boundaries doesn't mean being rigid or unkind. It's not about control. It's about clarity. It's about being rooted enough in yourself that you can stay kind and firm, open-hearted and self-protective. Boundaries are how we stay in relationships without losing ourselves in them. They're how we differentiate between guilt and responsibility, between empathy and enmeshment, between connection and codependence. When you model boundaries, you stop needing people to guess what you need, and you stop expecting yourself to carry what's not yours. You stop leaking energy trying to make everyone comfortable. You stop managing other people's feelings at the cost of your own well-being. And you start trusting that the people who are meant to be in your life will honor your boundaries, not resent them. Listen, modeling boundaries isn't always easy. At first, it feels awkward, scary. Sometimes it even feels mean, especially when you've spent your whole life being available, agreeable, and accommodating. But the longer you practice, the more you realize boundaries aren't about building distance. They're about building trust. Because when people know where you stand, they don't have to walk on eggshells. When people know you'll speak up for yourself, they feel safer being honest with you too. Boundaries create safety, not just for you, but for everyone you're in relationship with. And here's the most beautiful part: when you model healthy boundaries, you don't have to convince people of your worth. You show it in your choices, in your time, in your presence, in your no, in your silence, in your walk away. You teach people that love can be warm and still have structure, that respect begins with the way you treat yourself, that you can be generous without being available 24/7, that "I'm not available for that" is not rejection, it's self-respect. And when you live like that, you give everyone around you an invitation to do the same. So model those boundaries out loud, with your feet, with your voice, with your life. Not to punish or prove, but to protect what is sacred. Not to shut people out, but to let the right ones in. Not because you owe anyone an explanation, but because you owe yourself a life that feels honest, aligned, and whole. Model it not just for yourself, but for the ones coming after you, because someone somewhere is watching you and learning that they are allowed to stop betraying themselves too. So, here we are standing in the discomfort, the clarity, and the power of a choice that might make some people uncomfortable. Ghosting is not cruelty, it is clarity, it is reclamation, it is choosing yourself without apology. We've been taught to be endlessly available, to soften our truths, to explain ourselves into exhaustion. We've been taught that walking away makes us selfish, that silence is failure, that boundaries are rejection. But what if we unlearned all of that? What if ghosting everyone isn't about disappearing? It's about reappearing in your own life. What if ghosting is the first moment you finally listen to that small, fierce voice inside that whispers enough? I'm not shrinking anymore. This isn't about cutting off love. It's about cutting off the performances we've been doing in the name of love. It's about ending the constant emotional labor, the caretaking of people who never learned how to care back. It's about leaving the table where your needs were always too much, your silence was always expected, and your presence was never protected. It's not about burning bridges for the sake of drama. It's about recognizing when the bridge only leads back to pain. So yes, it's time to ghost everyone who drains you, everyone who confuses love with possession, everyone who only listens to respond, not to understand, everyone who makes your nervous system tighten every time your phone buzzes. Ghost them, let it be quiet, let it be clean, because this is what it means to grow, to protect your peace, to model boundaries, to stop carrying what was never yours. To know deep in your bones that you are no longer available for one-sided relationships, emotional contortion, or conversations that only go in circles. And as you ghost them, may you return to yourself. May you remember that rest is sacred, that your worth isn't tied to who you can rescue, that silence can be an act of self-love, that walking away is not abandonment, it is alignment. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to protect your energy like your life depends on it, because sometimes it does. This isn't about vanishing. This is about choosing a life where you can show up fully, truthfully, and unapologetically. So ghost who you must, block who you must, release who you must, and then return. Stronger, softer, clearer to yourself. You were never too much. You were never asking for too much. You just finally stopped settling for too little.